Today in the sixth Voice Talks, we are with Prezi and our subject is Present More with Prezi. And I welcome you also with using Prezi video. We will present in English. If you want to follow us in Turkish, it is possible to get simultaneous translation service with Prezi. And you can see the links on the chat right now. And thanks to Prezi to be our sponsor in this event, and Nuri Murat Avcı, the founder of Buba Campus, for supporting us. As a mission of Lookwise, together with our members and business partners, we always focus on understanding the needs and provide solutions to the sector. In the past 3 months, we have experienced much more about rise of remote, such as online presentations, remote trainings, and not only business, also social meetings, coffee chats, even happy hours became virtual more than ever before. And today, Prezi's Director of Global Communications and Head of Remote, Spencer Waldron, is with us. And his mission is to help people have better meetings with more powerful communication. Prezi is a worldwide cloud-based platform that provides more effective connection with audience and have more than 100 million users through the world. Prezi is helping to reinvent the art of presentation. Welcome, Spencer. Thank you for being with us again.
Hi, you're welcome. Great to be here.
Thank you. Today, we want to talk about how to make online meetings more valuable and more engaging through Prezi. But before we start, I want to tell our audience that if you have any questions, please write on the chat during the meeting. At the end, we will try to answer all the questions with you. And now we can start with storytelling. Storytelling is important, Spencer, because to increase efficiency, to be more memorable, how can we adapt storytelling for maximizing effectiveness in online training?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Just before I start, just a little bit of housekeeping in Zoom. If you put it on speaker view, then you'll see the presentation as the best it can. So storytelling. I guess today is about telling my story. You know, I have been doing a lot of content around video for probably about 2 years now. Primarily because we started to create Prezi video. And before then, I guess I was a lot like the people on the call. I was used to talking in a physical location, in a conference or an event. And, you know, I suddenly started to do this all on video and suddenly realized I need to change how I'm doing something, because when you treat it exactly the same as a physical location, it's not as easy, or it doesn't sound as good when it suddenly becomes a virtual talk. So yeah, I want to kind of share my journey, I guess, of the last 2 years and some of the things that I've learned, and hopefully they'll help you as well. So let's start with storytelling. I'm a little bit obsessed with story for the last few years, and that started when I took my 2 kids to see this movie, the Lego movie, when it first came out at the cinema. Now, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. You know, it was a very entertaining movie and we all enjoyed it. And I could probably talk for an hour just on what you can learn about storytelling from how that movie was made. But this is not the reason that I'm telling you this story. It's because of what happened, or what my children did after the movie had finished. Because the first thing they did when we got home was they ran to their bedroom, they got their Lego, and 2 hours later they were standing in front of me and they were saying, you know, like, wow, Dad, look what we made. And they'd made the spaceship that Batman was flying in the movie. And this for me was like this, you know, light bulb moment when I suddenly realized, of course, that movie had spent an hour and a half teaching my children that they can build anything that they want out of Lego. Because that's what they saw Emmett do, who was the hero of the movie. They saw him go from somebody who couldn't build anything out of Lego to being the master builder and saving the universe. And they were able to put themselves into the footsteps of Emmett and kind of believe that they could do it too. So it kind of helped me understand that that's Lego's story as a strategy, that kids can build anything they want out of Lego. They're just limited by their imagination. And it's the same as, you know, when Nike talks to me as a runner, because running's my big passion. And, you know, they would say to me, Spencer, you can be a better athlete. So it's the same thing. It's telling somebody a story about a place in the future that they want to get to. And it really started to help me form this idea that when you tell somebody a story about a place in the future that they want to get to, it can put a belief into the mind of that person that will then change their behavior. Now, this all happens at a subconscious level, because our emotions actually come from an unconscious areas of our brain. And there's lots of things going on in decision making in terms of the unconscious parts of the brain, because, you know, risk avoidance is the big thing that our brain is trying to do. How do I keep this human being safe? Or what about reward? What's in it for me? And then the third big thing that's happening is, you know, novelty. You know, oh, this is new. What can I learn from it? And all of those things are kind of coming together to kind of help us understand why we like listening to stories, because, you know, we're looking for clues on how to behave in the future if we arrive at a situation where we don't know what to do or how to act or how to get better or how to succeed. So story like that can be really powerful. So when you think about your training, then, you know, how do you do that? How do you tell a story about the place that your training will take somebody to? And I always think back to my granddad. My granddad was always telling me and my brother stories, almost as like a moral compass. Here's how you can behave when you're older, based around the values that were important to him. And we can apply that to the stories we tell about our trainings, because that starts to really help people connect to what it is that you're doing. But it's all very good that I have this amazing story to tell you, but how do I get you to pay attention in the first place? Because, you know, everybody's day is busy, and, you know, we can learn a lot from the media about this, because the media are very good at getting us to pay attention to stories. And they do it by saying, okay, here you are over here, and here's where you want to get to. And they talk about it in a way that the gap between where you are now and where you want to get to creates tension. And when something creates tension, it creates a little bit of anxiety, and we pay attention. And that's great for the media, because that keeps you ranting and raving on social media and sharing and talking. But for us, we need it to go further than that, because we know that we can say, okay, here's you, Spencer. You're not very fit at the moment, but you could be a better athlete. Here's you when you've just ran your first marathon. So that tension, I'm like, yeah, I want to do that, but I'm kind of not really moving forward. So the missing ingredient is hope, because when you give somebody a story that has hope in it, how you can do it, here's the steps you can do it. Then when we're in hope mode, we ask questions. We want to explore. We want to discover. So our secret formula for attention and getting somebody to make an action is this kind of anxiety plus hope. Now, all of this helps us to make this emotional connection, and it happens primarily at an unconscious level. But we all know that most of the time, our conscious brain, our cerebral cortex, is what we hear or what we feel. It's the brain that you're using right now to think, who is this guy? Should I believe him? There are better things to do on a Friday afternoon. Where's this going? But that's how we justify things. So the second part of getting somebody to make a decision in our favor is trust. Because you can tell a story that says, here's that place in the future that you can get to, which helps connect emotionally. And that's good because it happens unconsciously, but it also needs to be followed up by answering the question, can this person do what they say they're going to do? What proof do I have? What evidence do I have? And this is where things like customer stories, social proof become really, really powerful. Because if you remember back to the story of my children watching the Lego movie, in the way that they could put themselves into the shoes of the hero of that story and think, hey, maybe I could build something out of Lego. It's the same when a customer listens to the story of somebody who took your training, because what you want to make your customer the hero of the story, because you want prospective customers to be able to put themselves into their footsteps and go, hey, maybe I could do that as well. So this for me is why story is really powerful. So that was a very long-winded way to answer the question.
Very nice. We see the importance of storytelling very well. Thank you. So let's now talk about presentation skills. What are the most important presentation skills when moving trainings or presentations to online? What can we talk about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, the big thing we're seeing is, especially in events, or if you're doing training that may be like a whole day, when you do that in a physical room, it's easier to do than when you do it online for a whole day, because if you're not careful, it can turn into a webinar that lasts for 8 hours, which is going to be hard for people to concentrate on. And this is kind of gets to the crux of why we created Prezi Video in the first place, because, you know, what you normally see when, you know, somebody does an online presentation is something like this. So my screen takes up the whole my slide, or my presentation takes up the whole screen, and you've stopped listening to me because you're trying to read the text. What does that say? Does it help me? And if you look on the laptop over on the right hand side at the top, you'll see this little photograph of me, which is what you would normally see in you know, this kind of webinar environment. And you know, that's where you lose the human connection, because all of a sudden the slide becomes the focus, not me. And when you see a person and you make eye contact, it helps to kind of keep that connection going. And, you know, it's not just all about the content, it's also about me as the presenter. So I guess, you know, that's the first thing to think about, is how can I keep that engagement with somebody by they see me, I see them on the camera. So the whole idea that we wanted to do with Prezi Video was, you know, to allow you to be on the screen with your graphics at the same time. It's also really great as a reminder about what you need to talk about, because if I go forward, like I see this in front of me on the screen the same way that you do. So for me, it's also, I can use it to remember what I'm going to talk about, and also it looks good and people see me. And I'll talk a little bit later about movement, because movement is super important for attention. So yeah, so Prezi Video, there's two main ways to use it. What you see on the screen here is our what we call the quick start templates. So we have a number of templates that are already pre-built. You can't change the colors, you can't change the main design. And what we allow you to do is obviously to just add text. You can see on the other side, add text and add images. So this is a really quick way that, you know, really within 20 minutes, half an hour, you can build this presentation. And then of course you can choose, do I record it and just send it to somebody as either a file or as a URL, or I can go live with it and use it like we've been doing in this webinar. The second stage is we have some more elegant, I would call them custom built templates. And here you can change both the colors, you can change the fonts, you can add your logo. So it's more involved. You have to spend more time on design or add in your content. But then you get a lot more flexibility of making it your own brand and colors and things like that. And again, then we just have like the Prezi app that you can download, and you can see there, this is what I'm using right now to you know, kind of present this, and you just import it. You pick, okay, in this particular instance, we're using Zoom. So I choose Zoom and off I go, or I can choose just to record it as a separate thing. So I think like the important thing for me, as much as, okay, yes, I'm always going to be passionate about, you know, use Prezi Video, but I think visuals are something that are, you know, incredibly important. They're the same way that when you've been in a room doing your training, that the visuals are there to support you and to help engage the audience. And I think using this combination of you as the presenter, as the hero, and your visuals there to support you and to shine as well is pretty powerful. So that's the first thing I was going to say in terms of, you know, how can we kind of do this moving from a physical room to an online environment. So I thought the second thing that's probably worth talking a little bit about is the setup. So again, this is something that, you know, I've 2 years in the making of this setup, because I started 2 years ago where I just decided, okay, I need to understand video. And I just opened a YouTube account and I just started creating video for my YouTube channel. I didn't tell anybody about it. I didn't promote it to anybody. And it was this really powerful learning experience. And I started to understand, like, okay, what equipment do I need? So what you see here on the screen, and I'll go through some of these, is the setup I'm using right now to talk to you. And what I discovered, because in the beginning I just shot it, you know, I just did the video on the computer using the laptop camera, or I have like a little digital camcorder from years ago. But what I suddenly found, especially when I was doing video indoors, that it wasn't looking as good as I wanted it to. So the first thing I invested in was the camera that you see there. It's a Logitech 4K camera. And that was somewhere in the region of about 130 euros. I think in total, I probably spent about 300 euros on all of these things that you see here. So it's not cheap, but it's also not astronomical in terms of setup. But it makes such a difference to the quality of your production or your video content that you put out there. So the 4K video was really good because obviously the video or the camera on your laptop tends to be like low quality. So that's definitely a worthwhile investment. And the second thing was these two little studio lights, which again were around 100 euros. So the lights and the camera by far were the big expenses. And again, I'm using these lights now. If I switch it off here, you see straight away it alters how the light looks. So lighting, especially when you're indoors and if you can't be near a window to get natural light, that's something that's definitely worth investing in. And if I zoom in a little bit, this is the desk I'm sat at right now. So you can see the lights on either side of that. And you see that big ugly microphone there with the soundproofing or the echo shield around it. So that's something that I also wanted to invest in because the sound is also really important. So again, you know, you can't see it, it's just below the camera here. But that was the next thing that I wanted to improve. And another tool here that's quite interesting, it's called crisp.ai. And it's a software that can remove background noise. So if you're like me and you have young kids that might be running around making a lot of noise, or I also have a construction site next to my apartment. So not now, but in the daytime, sometimes I get a lot of noise from builders. But something like that can really just take away that sound completely. So yeah, so I think setup is important. It can make a huge difference to the quality, but I would start with lighting. I think if I had to pick one thing, lighting would be it. And you know, the next thing is, okay, how do I frame myself in this little tiny box that we find ourselves in? So I was going to talk about a few different things because obviously you see here I've positioned this so I'm sat in this half of the frame and I know that this side is going to be where my content is. Now, if I take away the content, you see I have this horrible ugly door here, but I know that most of the time it's covered by the content. And I've also thought about, okay, what's happening in the background? So I don't want this big, messy background with lots of things everywhere, but equally, maybe I don't want just a plain white background because that's a bit stark. So I managed to find a position that works and I added this plant that you see here just to break it up a bit. So it's something that looks okay, but not too noisy, that it doesn't interrupt stuff. The next thing is, okay, how do I sit in this frame? Because if you look at this, this is what you see on the majority of video calls, conferences, things like that. And that's predominantly because people are using a laptop and they have it on their desk and they put the lid of the laptop back, and then you're either looking up somebody's nose or you're looking at the ceiling. And equally, if you come too close to the camera, it's not good. And the same with this one here, that if you go back too far, that also doesn't look good. So what I have is I have like a desk extender that lifts up and down. So I can have the camera so it's at the same like eye level, and that tends to look the best. So again, small practical things, but makes a huge difference in the long run. And I guess, like, you know, finally it would be practice, practice, practice. It's the thing that you will have learned doing physical trainings as opposed to virtual trainings. But, you know, every single time I do any video content, I will practice it again and again and again until I cannot hear the words anymore, because then I can focus on other things to do with the setup and how I want to move things. And I know the content really well. But I would imagine that you all know that because you're already doing a lot of training with people. So yes, that would be my tips.
Thank you. Yes, these are very important informations. I agree. Let's say that we start to use Prezi Video and we are ready in all setup tools you talked about. But what about being on camera?
Yes.
It can be challenging when compared with offline and classroom trainings. Can we talk about how can we feel more comfort, more confidence during online trainings?
Yeah, it's really important topic. It's something that, again, has taken me 2 years to do a lot of learning. You know, I think, like I said before, I started out with a YouTube channel and I recorded the first video and I watched it and I was just, oh my God, no, it's so not good. And, you know, and that was when I thought, okay, I need to sit and understand, why did that not sound how I imagined it would be. And I think the first lesson that I learned was, you know, the 5 years before that, I'd been talking on stages and at conferences and, you know, doing in company trainings like everybody on this call does. And I just tried to talk the same way as if I was in a room and I had lots of people in front of me. And I suddenly understood that I need to do this as if I'm talking to one person. And I was lucky enough to come across somebody who gave me this great tip about just take a photograph of somebody that you know. It could be a partner, a friend, a stranger, a picture from the internet, it doesn't matter. And just tape it next to the camera when you're recording and imagine that you're talking to that one person. And it really changed a lot in terms of how it sounded. Because it starts to sound a bit more personal. And I'm still working on that. I'm still, you know, playing with this all the time. But it definitely has a big change when you try to talk to one person. It just comes across more conversational. The second thing I learned was, you know, definitely don't read from a script. I always build a script whenever I go to do a talk. That's how I start. I start by building a script, but you can't read that because it's almost impossible to memorize an entire script. But I do that to understand, okay, if I have 20 minutes to talk, I know that I speak roughly 130 words per minute. So I do that so I understand, okay, this is what I can talk about. But then, and if you remember back to that photograph of my desk, there was I don't know if you remember, I was going to talk about it and I forgot, but there was 2 Post-it notes either side of the camera. And I use that a lot where I take just the key points that I want to talk about, and I'll either physically put them on a Post-it note and stick them on the screen, or now I use on the Macs, you have this like Stickies software program that's free. and they're like virtual notes that you can put on the desktop. And I think there's also something similar or the same for PCs. But this is really good for me because then I can still be looking at the camera. If I need to, I can just glance to where my key points are. So this is just another way that makes you kind of a bit more comfortable, and you have the setup right and things like that. And again, helps to make it feel a little bit better. The next thing I really started to try to teach myself and to improve myself was by something called the 20% rule. And this comes from, you know, when you first start doing video, and this is something I definitely did, is I used to stand very still and I used to talk and wasn't really a lot of movement. And that's like almost the same as talking in a very monotone voice for the whole time. And what I learned is if you do 20% more movement with your hands, 20% more change of your voice, and also 20% more volume, because the temptation when you're sat at home, especially like this, I'm in a room here all on my own, I don't see all of you in front of me, that I just talk in this quiet voice. But if you talk at a 20% higher level, then it changes a lot. Now, the other thing that this really helps me with is filler words. So if you say, or my filler word is, you know. So sometimes, like I did this amazing thing just before Christmas, where I challenged myself to do 30 videos in 30 days, giving 30 tips on LinkedIn. And it was going through that process where I suddenly noticed, wow, I say, you know, so many times. So by speaking at a higher level with your voice, that actually gets rid of that, because when you're talking with a little bit more strain, then it kind of stops you doing this. So 20% more. I just used a filler word. The next thing is to kind of really show your passion, because that also changes how you talk. When you talk from a point of passion, and I imagine that all of you will be very passionate about the topic that you train people in. And I don't often quote people like Winston Churchill, but Winston Churchill has this really lovely quote about, if you want to move people, to take an action or move them to tears, they first have to see the emotion on you. And I think, you know, that's why we cry when we watch a sad movie. We see somebody cry in the movie, and that's when our eyes start to cry as well. So when you talk about something with passion, it makes it more engaging. It makes people connect to you much more. It makes you feel more confident because it's something you care about. So all of these things can really help how you feel when you're standing in front of a camera. But again, I'm going to come back to this really boring thing about, it's just do 100 videos and you'll feel a lot more confident. When I think back to this thing that I challenged myself on LinkedIn by doing 30 videos in 30 days, I just had to keep doing it every day. And that just, it's almost like if you're scared of flying, you know, the antidote is to do lots of flights. And it's the same thing here. It's scary to press that publish button. It's scary to hit the record button, but that's the only way that you can do it. So you don't have to show people those 100 videos, but make 100 videos, because, you know, that's just what changes everything. And that's it. That's my tips.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Spencer, for your presentation. And I noticed that I'm going to keep on practicing after that presentation. Am I right? Working remote is different and challenging, and
yes.
So we see that Prezi video helps people to show the power of creativity while moving to online.
Yeah.
I'm also a Prezi user for 5 years, starting from the presentations, and I can say that don't be afraid to learn Prezi video and Prezi tools. Its learning process is really fun and will make you differentiate in your job. It's a reality. And now we will have our Q&A session. And let me look at the questions, if you excuse me for a while. And yes, The first question from Özlem Melek Tutkan. Do you recommend us a good example of storytelling presentation? Any TED Talks or any other?
Ooh, I'm enjoying that question. The challenge is choosing which one.
You can say everything.
I think one of the most amazing talks that I saw that's based around storytelling, and it really connects to the emotion plus trust formula that I was talking about, is there is a charity called Charity Water. And there's the CEO of this organization is a guy called, and I'm going to lose his name now, Harrison. I think it's something Harrison, Sam Harrison. This will come back to me. But he did a keynote talk where he basically tells his own personal story about how he became the CEO of Charity Water. And it's quite a hard story. You know, when I first heard it, I was like, wow, really? This is like, you know, he was talking about how he was like this nightclub promoter, and he was like not in a very healthy place, and gradually through traveling, and he suddenly became the CEO, and all the way through this, you suddenly realize what he's doing is he's telling the personal story of him, and then he tells the stories of some of the people he saw and he wanted to help. And all the way through these stories, what I suddenly understood what he's doing is he's making me connect to the people, the problem, the thing that needs, so I'm connecting to it on an emotional level. And if you watch it, there's a number of different videos from Charity Water. A shorter version is, there's one called The Spring, and you see it's 20 minutes, 10 minutes, all of it is about stories that will make you emotionally connect. And the second half is all about building trust, because at about minute 11, it suddenly kicks into, we've done things completely different than other charities. All the money goes to the cause. The organization gets funded from other places. Here's all the people that have done amazing things. So it's a really good example of building emotional connection and then building trust afterwards. So yeah, charity, in general, anything from Charity Water is really interesting to look at from a storytelling point of view.
Yes, thank you. And the second question from Ebru Altınörs. So do we shoot the video on Prezi, or do we shoot in another app and import to Prezi?
Good question. So basically, you use whatever program you normally use to do a webinar or a video conference. The Prezi app just connects to it. It's basically a virtual camera. So for example, now we're in Zoom. And if you look at the bottom left of the Zoom screen, you've got like the microphone icon and the video icon. And you just literally click on that. So it pops up the options and you choose the Prezi virtual camera, which you'll see there when you have the Prezi app desktop. And then all the Prezi app does is basically sit between your webcam and Zoom, for example. So the camera feed just goes through the Prezi app into Zoom, and then you basically, whatever presentation you have loaded up in the app will show on the screen. So yeah, as long as you can choose the camera, then you'll be able to use the Prezi video app.
But we shoot the video on Prezi. This is the way we do it. And a second question from Ebru Altınörs again. Do you use a teleprompter app? Is there anyone that you would recommend?
Ooh, I don't. I have done before. Part of my journey the last few years, I did a little mini web series, and I actually, which I did for Prezi, and I was in a more professional studio, and they had like a professional camera with the teleprompter in the camera. And actually I found it pretty simple to get used to using that, but I don't use it day to day. This just comes again from the practice. And why I don't like using a script, because generally every time I tell the story, it will be slightly different, or every time, I talk about certain things, it might be different. And that's also connected to like storytelling principles. It's the underlying value, the underlying message that's important to get across. The packaging might slightly change every time. But yeah, so it's a good question. I don't use one. I think there are some apps or softwares that you can get which act as a prompt, but yeah, no, I've not used one yet.
Just practice, you said.
Yeah, it's boring. It's boring, but it's practice. That's it.
No, it's not boring. It's much more longer. just that. Nur Murat Avcı wrote, "Congratulations, very good, thanks." Thank you.
Thank you.
And just close questions like Ebru Altınöz. Does the presentation have the ability to merge videos with video upload and presentation later?
Can you say that question again? I just want to make sure I got the second part right.
In Prezi video, we can't upload Prezi. We can't upload video to the Prezi video. We have to shoot the video in Prezi. Will we have a feature like that? Or?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So video in video. Yeah, definitely.
And we can merge the videos.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know yet. I mean, we're pretty close to, it's coming soon. I can't give an exact date yet, but it's nearly there. It's pretty complex to do video in video. But yeah, so the quick answer is yes, it's coming out soon. Now, in terms of, the way that I see it is I'll still be here and you'll see the video next to me as almost like an image, but it will be a video. But yeah, beyond that, in terms of what other capabilities you'll be able to do with merging different videos together or something like that, I don't know. Maybe it's something you'd have to do in a video editing software first and then bring it and just play it in Prezi Video. But yes, yeah, I'm excited to get my hands on that when it comes out as well.
Thank you. And another question from Özlem Melek Tutkan. Can we use these tips also for the job interviews, or is it something different?
Yeah, that's a good question. Job interviews online are, I always think that the main thing that somebody's looking for when they do a job interview is, do I like this person and will they fit in with the team? The question that you always get in an interview is, tell me about yourself. And tell me about yourself is not list all the things that you've done. What they're looking for is, am I going to like this person? So I think, telling stories about values can be really important. So think about, okay, what might they be looking for? And think about how you can answer that question in certain ways. So I think in general, storytelling is always really important. So I definitely use that in an interview basis. I don't see any reason why you can't use a tool like Prezi Video. For example, we do a lot of stuff about visual resumes. So we've done stuff where before we used to do like a visual resume inside Prezi, but now we're starting to see people that they record themselves and they have images of either things that they've done or the logos of the companies they've worked for, and they use it as almost like a video message that they send to people. But again, I don't see any reason why, if you wanted to talk about one particular aspect of your work or your life, that you couldn't use something like this. In terms of studio setup, then I wouldn't do that just for an interview, I don't think, unless it's something that you're doing day in and day out and you're using video a lot. Then I would make that investment, because definitely having good lighting, good sound, thinking about your background, this is all important in terms of the image that comes across. So yeah, I think practice for sure, practice, because you'd be amazed at how many people don't maybe record themselves just on their mobile video about how I'm going to answer certain questions in a job interview. And actually that can tell you a lot about how you come across. Yeah.
Exactly.
Good question.
Okay, thank you. From Nilgün Çağlar, how can we use our mimics in the most natural way when shooting videos? Again, being on camera, I think.
Was that, I missed the first bit, using your arms?
Yeah, how can we use our mimics, face?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
The most procedural way when shooting videos?
Yeah, that's also a really juicy question. I think for me, that's also been a journey, because if I go back really a long time, when I first started talking on stages, I'm a very expressive person with my hands, and my hands will be all over the place. And somebody who was more experienced than me said, Spencer, if you keep your hand movement into a 1 meter by 1 meter box, it's not distracting. If you go outside of that 1 meter by 1 meter box, then people start to, what's he doing with his hands? So that was really good from the stage. But then when you get into this tiny little box, which is even a smaller space, then, you know, you have to be a little bit careful with your hand movement. So I try not to do too much. And what I also do is I purposely have the screen and the camera a little bit higher. So I might be moving my hands here now, but you won't see it. But then I remember that actually I want to have certain things where I want to bring that movement onto the screen. Now, how you do that in a way that's natural is you just have to find how you do it in a way. You know, for me, it's something that I have changed a lot since doing video, because now I start to interact with, you know, when I bring the content up onto the screen, then all of a sudden I'll interact with the content. So I've started to do this kind of movement or this kind of movement a lot more. And in the beginning, it was also a little bit strange because, you know, I'd be talking like this and then I would suddenly point and it looked all a bit robotic. So I also had to find, you know, like a way of doing that more as a natural movement. But it's just do 100 of them and you'll find it. There's no one size fits all for everybody, I don't think.
Thank you. Yes, practicing is the best. Ebru Altıners told us there seems to be different level of memberships. Which level gives us the characteristics you mentioned? Prezi memberships.
Yeah, so I would the plus membership, because the important thing, if you're doing live training, you want to be able to download the Prezi app, because that then gives you the ability to, it won't take so much bandwidth and things like that. You can go live in the free version and do it from the browser, but there's a lot of things competing for bandwidth. And it depends on how good your Wi-Fi is. And, you know, right now I have this like 15-meter Ethernet cable, so I can always plug into the hard line, so I don't rely on glitches in the Wi-Fi. Yeah, I would recommend the plus subscription.
Okay, thank you. I think we have another question for you. No. Okay, thank you. I have one question. Think that I haven't used Prezi before, and I'm going to start today.
Yeah.
What is the best way to start Prezi, the Prezi presentation or Prezi video? First read the guidelines, then start, or first try to prepare a presentation and again practice and practice? What's the best way?
I love this question. So it's very important, because, you know, one of the things that you have to do with Prezi is almost take out your slide brain and put a new Prezi brain in. Because, you know, Prezi is still about the only presentation software that's not linear. So it's not like slide, 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 slide. So Prezi is basically this 3D canvas. So I always say to people, think of Google Maps. It works the same way as Google Maps. You know, like you know, if I, let me bring the presentation back up. So for example, you know, like if I go, hang on, let's go all the way back to the beginning. So if I start at the very top, then it's here. You know, this is almost like I'm at a country level. I'm in Google Maps and I see, okay, I can see, you know, Istanbul there. Now, when I zoom in on Google Maps, that disappears, the Istanbul, and now I see all of the neighborhoods in Istanbul. So I can see the 4 neighborhoods here, and then I scroll in again and I go into one particular neighborhood, and now I see all the shops and the street and things like that. And I think like that's the big thing that people need to change when they want to understand how to get the best out of Prezi, because once you get that, then actually Prezi is pretty simple to use. It has a lot less menu options and widgets and things that say something like PowerPoint has. But the big difference is thinking about, okay, I have this 3D zoomable canvas. How can I tell a story using that capability that I have? And I've seen people do it the opposite way. They've almost like, we call it like the big reveal. So you can start like at a street level, if we keep with the metaphor of Google Maps, and gradually zoom out and then do the big reveal at the end. And I've seen that used in really, really big ways. So that's the first thing. The second thing, when it specifically comes to Prezi Video, is obviously start with the quick create templates, which is what you have, one of them that you've been using here right now. Because that's a very easy way. You just literally type in the text, you add the image, and then you can present with it. So I think that's a good way to start. And then the next, which is, you know, like if you look at the presentation that I've been using here, this is actually one of our custom templates. So you can, it's called Advanced Create, and we have all the templates, and then you can start to play around more of, okay, how do I want to build this in a more deeper way? And then I guess the final thing to add to that is, you know, we have a lot of how-to video content. So if you look at the Prezi YouTube channel, there's a lot of playlists on how to build your first Prezi video and go deeper from there. And also find me on LinkedIn and come ask me questions. I'm always happy to connect to people on LinkedIn.
Thank you very much. And one more question from Umut Ahmet Tarakçı. What could be tips special for coaches? We have corporate coaches with us today.
Okay. That's a very wide open question. I'm going to narrow, if you can put in the chat.
If you have.
Yeah, no, I think like if you want to put in the chat, maybe specific to presentations or to other stuff, but a few things that come into my mind straight away is I think we're going to see, you know, like for example, like Zoom has these breakout rooms. So you can say, okay, I can share a piece of content. I can do my nice Prezi video presentation. And then I can say, okay, let's put everybody into groups, do some work, and then we'll come back in 6 minutes or whatever it is. So I think there's the technology, both, you know, I mean, like Prezi was lucky in a sense that, you know, we already saw this trend happening of online video, and we already started this, you know, kind of three years ago in the making. But what I'm seeing is there's a lot of technology companies around this space that are now playing catch up because of what happened with COVID, where I think you'll see more and more features in that way. But I think it's just thinking about that combination. But did I see something pop up? Was there a clarification on the question? I can't see. Let me have a look.
Clarification?
I saw.
Are templates available for pitching presentation? Is this the question?
No, it's somebody else. Sorry, it's the okay. Coaches. Okay, so I'll stick with the coaches.
Special tips for coaches.
Yeah. So outside of that, I think the, you know, there's, as a coach, you're actually think of yourself as a mentor. And if you look at storytelling, one of the things I learned around storytelling, and this, I started by reading this really detailed book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which was this, Joseph Campbell wrote it. And it was, he looked at 2,000 years of myths and legends and found that they all followed the same structure, and it's called the hero's journey. And what we see is 50% of all movies and books use this structure. And once you know it, it ruins every movie you ever look at, because you know what's coming next in a way. And when I first came across this structure, I thought, hey, this is really good if I'm going to do like a customer story or a testimonial or something like that. But I didn't really take it much further than that. And then I suddenly realized one day, looking at Nike's storytelling, that they basically used the hero's journey as an entire communication structure. So if you think about what I was saying about the story about my kids and the Lego, is that, you know, you want your customers to step into the shoes of the hero. And, you know, when you do any piece of video communication, you want to make your customer the hero of the story. Your role is the guide. So when I'm saying to people, like, if you're doing a bit of, say, brand communications and you're doing a piece of video, is don't make the company the hero, make your customer the hero. And what I always say to people is, like, take something like, I don't know, Harry Potter. So your customer is Harry Potter. You are Hagrid. You're the mentor. The same in Star Wars. Your customer is Luke Skywalker. You are Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're the one who gives the training, the magic weapons that help them overcome the obstacles. So I think what I would say is, in terms of tips for coaches, and sorry, that was a very long way of explaining it, but is, you know, make sure that you see yourself as Obi-Wan Kenobi. You know, how do you get Luke Skywalker to connect to that big scary place in the future that you want them to get to at the end of the training? Because if you say to somebody, hey, go do this big, scary, audacious thing, learn this new skill, the first thing that happens is risk avoidance. Somebody goes, yeah, but I can't do that. Can I trust you? What makes you think if I invest the time that I can do it? And your job is to give courage, because courage doesn't come from the inside like we all think. Courage comes from the outside. People teach us, people mentor us, they give us, you know, words of encouragement. So think of yourself as a coach, not just in the session, but also in your communications, because your job is to say to somebody, I've got your back. I'm going to help you get to this place in the future you want to get to. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be struggle along the way, and I'm going to be honest about that struggle, but I'm going to be there. I'm going to give you the training. I'm going to give you the magic weapons in terms of software, handouts, whatever it is, you know, and I'm going to give you friends and allies, because every hero in every movie, you know, Harry Potter didn't do it on his own. He kind of was there with Ron Weasley and Hermione. You know, Luke Skywalker didn't do it on his own. He did it with Han Solo and Chewbacca. So how do you bring the community into it? How do you bring other people that are on the course to help each other to move forward? So sorry, that's a very long way, but it's as a coach, I think you've got an amazing natural way of doing this. But
and the school will operate. Okay, then last question. Are templates available for pitching presentation of startups?
Yes, there's pitch templates. One quick thing I would say on pitching, there's a guy called Andy Raskin who has this amazing 5-step pitch structure, which is, and I love it because it's also based on emotion plus trust. And it basically is, you know, talk about a big change happening in the world, tease the promised land, show, you know, your magic weapons, and provide evidence that they can go do it. So Andy Raskin, if you go, and the first time he did it was with, it's going to forget me now. There's a company that they did one presentation, but the other one I remember, which was from Drift. There was a pitch presentation by David Cancel, who's the CEO of Drift. And that was using that structure. So yeah, definitely check that out.
Okay, thank you. And I think these are all questions, would you write? Okay. And so, Spencer, we came to the end of our meeting. Thank you very much for being with us and to talk about moving to online in a more effective and engaging way. Spencer Waldron, Prezi's Director of Global Communications and Head of Remote, was with us today. And thanks to our audience to be here with us too. Thanks to Buba Campus for their support and our sponsor, Prezi. Thank you. Lookwise will continue to bring the industry together. See you at the next Wise Talks. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.